tell you that now. But I am going to call this meeting to order as the chair tonight. Let's start off with the roll call.
Okay. Monica Alt.
You're muted.
Sorry, I
Monica.
think you're muted.
Can you hear us, Monica?
My computer froze here.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Marcela Diaz.
I'm here.
Naja Druva.
Present.
Bruce Finger.
Here.
Emily Kaltenbach.
Here.
Marian Maestas.
Here.
Rashawn Morris.
Here.
Mary Louise Romero Betancourt.
Here.
Judge Michael Vigil.
Here.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Here.
And Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Present.
Okay, that's everyone.
All right, thank you. So the approval of the agenda, essentially we have a discussion item. It probably shouldn't have said formation because it really was just a discussion about the task force working groups. And I think we're going to kind of broaden that, but we don't need to make any changes. So what would you all like to do? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll second.
Second by Michael. So let's do a roll call to approve the agenda.
Okay. Marcela Diaz.
Yes.
Naja Druva.
Yes.
Bruce Finger.
Here. Yes.
Emily Kaltenbach.
Yes.
Marian Maestas.
Yes.
Rashawn Morris.
Yes.
Mary Louise Romero Betancourt.
Mary Louise, can you say that again?
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Thank you. No, it's okay. Judge Michael Vigil.
Yes.
Monica Alt.
Yes.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes. And I don't know if Joe's on, but someone just, oh, never mind. They were looking for the streaming on YouTube and it's on.
I'm working on closed captioning right now. We should have it here in about 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. So approval of the minutes, essentially it's what we we did last week, which aren't minutes. I'm tired of it saying minutes because we really don't have minutes. It's just approving last meeting, our agenda, the minutes, and our discussion. And there, I don't know if anyone had questions on that, but can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move for approval if there are no changes.
No changes, okay.
I'll second.
Second by Michael. Can I get a roll call?
Yes, Naja Druva.
Oh, yes.
Bruce Finger.
Yes.
Emily Kaltenbach.
Yes.
Marian Maestas.
Yes.
Rashawn Morris.
Yes.
Mary Louise Romero Betancourt.
Yes.
Judge Michael Vigil.
Yes.
Monica Alt.
Yes.
Marcela Diaz.
Yes.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, minutes approved. Whew, that's over with. I just wanted to let you all know that I am okay with you calling me my first name and Chris as well. I'm kind of getting frustrated with this, the formality of it and trying to figure out like, what should I call her? What should I call him? And so I think it's fine if you want to say Renee, if you feel comfortable, Chair, you could say that, or Councilwoman, but I really would like to just eliminate the kind of formality of this, even though we have to follow the structure of Robert's rules for the meetings. But I just wanted to be more comfortable, like we're having, as if we were together in a room, and I wouldn't necessarily have anybody have to call me by my title. And so I just wanted to let you know that you can call me Renee, and just get my attention, if you need to, by raising your hand or just unmuting yourself. So I'm gonna do my best to chair. I really like to have us have a short meeting tonight. I've been getting over being sick, and I think most of you probably spent as much time as I did in front of a screen all day long. So I would love for us to have an hour conversation. And I wanted us to lead with, well, first let me clarify. There was a desire to have a presentation by the public defenders and the district attorneys, and there was conversations via email. And ultimately, the district attorney, I don't think, responded, and then the public defender's office was interested. However, they didn't confirm with us, with staff, in a way that we could get it on the agenda in time. And so I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. We did talk to the person that was interested in presenting, and we're going to reschedule it for another time. I think it probably would be confusing, like, why are they presenting, and what kind of information do we need from them at this time? So I think we need to just wait on that, and then we can figure out what are the best presentations that help inform us and the data and that are most helpful in terms of our learning process. We did get feedback from you all about the the working groups. And I guess what I was feeling, and I don't know if you all have been feeling this way, and I talked to Chris about this and Jennifer, and I'm just gonna share what I think about like how this process is going, other than how you all know that I don't feel like the formality really helps have a very fluid conversation with each other and having people feel comfortable about talking and sharing. So, but what I've also been feeling is like a feeling of stuck, like not being grounded in what we're wanting to do and being clear about the approach of the work that we want to achieve with the task force. And I think mostly it's been because we've been navigating uncharted territory with a task force and this kind of structure and this particular topic. And then the confines that we have with, Robert's rules and the structure of public meetings. So that's been hard for me. And I also feel like after reading some of your input around interest of certain working groups, there were comments and just suggestions about maybe that we haven't like started in the right place. And I'm not blaming anybody, or I mean, I'll take responsibility since this is new for me, but I think it's also just feeling like we're not grounded in the work we do in this work, because we have been putting the cart before the horse, and so have I. I mean, I've been wanting to get into the nitty gritty of like, let's figure out the working groups. And then the big piece for me has been the fact that we haven't had a facilitator, which I think would have been really helpful from the beginning. And because that didn't happen because of bureaucratic structures, we will have Sunshine Muse. She will be our facilitator. She'll get to introduce herself in January, but she can only start in January. And that's partly because of the paperwork and what it takes to get through the city process. But I think the fact that some of the feedback I got from a few of you is that we haven't really established our guiding principles. And when I say guiding principles, I'm talking about like, what are we trying to achieve? What are our goals and objectives with this group? And what are the things that are possible given what's been in the scope of the resolution, the time frame we're looking at, and then also the authority we have. And so all those things combined made me think about the fact that we haven't established like a kind of general sense of guiding principles of how we want to move forward, kind of more high level. And then we've been getting into these working groups, and I think that's fine because it still will help us navigate in the future. But I think what would help is if we actually had a facilitator talk us through and work work through guiding principles. And I did want to reference and have maybe a couple of people talk about the experience they had with another task force. It was the Municipal Drug Strategy Task Force, and many of their findings and recommendations that they gave to the governing body had to do with public safety. And so I had asked Emily and Marcela about their experience of how they actually established working groups with that task force. And it opened my eyes to the fact that I felt like we were not moving the way in the direction we needed, or maybe jumping ahead. And so I just want to put that out there and get your feedback, each of you, on what you're thinking. And if it would be helpful to hear from Marcela and Emily about how they structured that task force, so we could have a better idea about maybe the way we could move forward in January. So I'm just putting that out there, and I'm open to people disagreeing with my opinion of not feeling grounded or clear about the approach of our task force. And partly I feel like I wish we were together in person, because I think it makes it a lot easier to build relationships and trust, as well as starting to like get a feel of each other and our interests and our experiences. So I'm going to stop talking, and if there's anybody that wants to jump in and share what, response to what I'm saying, or some other.
Can I add to that, Renee?
Yes, Chris.
So I know you, took some of the blame. I also have to take at least 50% of the blame, since we're co-chairs, and the formality is one thing that kind of keeps us from building that relationship. The other thing is just the time frames that we're under. I mean, 6 months is not a long time, and so we have that feeling like we need to get something accomplished. We need to do something, and it puts pressure on us. And I guess I'd rather slow down, take the time to do this right. And if we have to extend the process, we can do that. Renee and I can go to the mayor, the governing body, and extend it, or request to extend it. So I'm ready to take a deep breath and kind of slow myself down and make sure we do this right. And whether we're formal or not, I want to encourage everybody that if you have a question or you have a comment, don't let the formality of maybe where we're at or what we're doing interfere with what you have to say. Everybody's voice is important. Everybody's opinions are important. So break in and say, hey, this isn't right, or this is what I'm feeling, whatever. Don't let the formality of kind of how we run meetings interfere with anything you have to say. And really, there's no bad time. There's no bad way to say anything. Let's just be open and really start building that trust relationship. So just wanted to say that as well. So thank you, Renee.
Any questions or different opinions about what I'm feeling? Michael?
I agree with you, what we need to do, but I thought what we've done so far has been very helpful. The information that we received from the police department and the fire department, because a lot of people don't know how they function. After getting the information that we got that the police chief gave us, we may not have an excessive force issue if the numbers are accurate, and that was sort of a focus of the reform all across the country, is the use of force against people. So I thought it was really helpful to see how they work, how they function. The data was really helpful. It was a lot of data to go through, but I agree. I think we're at a point now where we can start to focus on what we want to do. But so I don't think it was a waste of time, what we've done so far.
Mary Louise?
I just want to say that
my work before, when I worked for an organization that traveled around the country doing work with team building and really building relationships with our clients, Fortune 500 companies, the NBA, the NFL, what I know to be true is that when you give people mandates, they have a harder time accepting those mandates if we don't have better information about an organization within itself, what's working, what's not working, because we want people to be able to feel confident in how they respond to whatever we're requesting of them, right? And so I know from working in the community with kids that have had bad dealings and my own self with law enforcement, that anybody here that has a boss, when someone tells you, you need to do this, this, and this, because the task force said it, the way we treat people could be a lot different than when we say, thank you for all of the things that you're doing right. We want to honor that. And we want to allow you the opportunity to make that force better. And I need to say that because relationships, like we just talked about, they matter. And so I'm sure that everybody was probably frustrated as hell, because if you're an attorney or if you're a judge, you're like, Mary Louise, why are you asking about how you guys get along within your agency? And are you asking your police officers to step out of their comfort zone and to see what they're doing well and what they could do different? I know, and I get that from you guys, but I have to be the oddball, because I know that when you just force someone or try to force them to do it your way, it ain't happening, baby. I'm telling you. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. I don't see anyone else that's motivated to talk or say. I mean, you could say you may not agree with us saying slow down. What are you talking about? We don't need to slow down. But I think it's more just like having a structure that we feel comfortable with to move forward and be able to be honest about like some of the things that we can and cannot do, but also like the purpose. What is our purpose and goals of this committee? I guess I wanted Emily or Marcela to just explain that, maybe in the context of how the other task force functioned, because it just made me think about like ways to approach our work differently, I guess. Who would like to do? I'm putting you on the spot, but I don't see any other questions right now. I mean, I'd love to hear from everybody, but if you could just share a little bit more about that.
Sure, I'm happy to start, Renee, and thanks for the opportunity to share. And I know Marcella and I were just thinking about how that experience is relevant here, because I think we were faced with the same challenge at first. It felt like just so big, right? Like, where did we want to focus? And the background was that there was a resolution, it was passed, that we had to come back to the governing body with very specific recommendations on how to address drug and alcohol use from a health-centered approach instead of a criminalization and punitive approach. So we started with the idea that we really went back to that resolution and said, okay, here's sort of the overarching principle was we needed to really approach it from a health-centered approach. And so that helped us sort of focus, which I was looking back at our resolution, and I feel like that language in there around reimagining public safety and health for our community is sort of similar. And then we as a group decided that we needed some guiding principles that we knew that that we'd all agree on, because we had a real diversity in opinions on that group. And we decided, well, let's decide what we all agree on. And then our guiding principles became this document that we kept going back to make sure that our recommendations were really grounded in everything we thought was critical and important. And and in addition, and I think Marcella would be best to talk about the community input, because one of the guiding principles was about getting authentic community input, because what matters to the public is really important. And so we would use the guiding principle document as this foundation, but also what we heard from our community. So by the end of our process, which I also have to say we extended it, I think twice. We started out also with very ambitious timeline, and it just wasn't possible. We also had a lot more members on the group than we do here. And so we're sort of at a disadvantage because we can't have too many working groups, because then everyone would have to be almost on every one of them to make it impactful. So we ended up with 4 working groups that were in really broad categories. One was around prevention, one was around treatment, harm reduction, and public safety, which, don't apply here, but then we were able to really focus in those lanes. And we had 4 or 5 folks on each subgroup. And while that work was happening, so we did sort of 3 things simultaneously. We had our working groups, we were doing our community consultations, and we were also learning, we were listening to experts, or, sort of like we did at the last meeting where we had both the chiefs come and share. So we had some learning opportunities built in. So I don't know if that's helpful, but thanks for letting me share.
I don't know if Marcella, you wanted to add, or if there's anyone that had a question about that from the group. And to be honest, we didn't actually want to make this group too big, because it's hard to get, based on the structure, to get people the quorum factor when we have general meetings for the general group. That was part of it. But I mean, I hear you, what you say, Emily, about working groups and having more than 2 people on them. Marcella?
Thank you, Councilwoman and Councilor Rivera and Emily. I just wanted to follow up a little bit about the community consultation piece, because as Emily mentioned, I think there were many guiding principles, but one of them really was, we just need to make sure that even the premises that we're starting with are grounded and rooted in the experiences of community members around, people who are basically, in this case, impacted by the drug war in various ways. And so to do that, we actually, even before the task force started, we hosted, our organization within the immigrant community hosted a series of focus groups and community conversations. And dozens of people, and these were bilingual, were able just to have free willing conversations. There was a guided, we had some ideas about what we wanted to get out of that. And there was, there was a model focus group set of questions and ways to run it, but we really didn't want cookie cutter approaches to Santa Fe. We really wanted this to be Santa Fe. So we got a lot of input initially just on what kinds of questions should we be asking of our community? How should we be facilitating these conversations? And so even before our first meeting at the MDS task force, we were able to ground ourselves in some of that information. And it just kind of allowed us to create other guiding principles and objectives and ideas that were grounded in people who were impacted in a very specific way by public safety issues, as well as impacted by all of the, the different consequences of the drug war in this country. And so we did focus groups while the task force was happening. We used that model set of questions and focus group principles to come up with a series of questions for individual interviews of people who were impacted, as well as stakeholders in the community. And then we also were able to survey, in this case, it was law enforcement online, and it was an anonymous survey that I think it was like 42 law enforcement members participated in. So all in all, there were about 157 people who focused while this was happening, who were interviewed, questioned, who were able to participate. in that. And that really did ground us. And I think that is just, I think that personally, councilmen and councilwomen, I feel like we should be having that facilitated discussion about what our guiding principles are, what our goals and objectives are, what is the scope of this, what can we accomplish, what does the city have authority to do, before we start really drilling down on the focus groups. Because if we do high level recommendations, or even medium level recommendations, how do we, as Mary Louise mentioned, how do we have buy-in to the community? How are we grounded in that before any major shifts have to happen? They should really be based in what people are experiencing and feeling on the ground. And so one of our focus groups, I was a part of the prevention focus group, and one of the things in our learnings, and also being able to bring folks from around the country to talk about what they're doing in their communities. How is it different? What interesting models are they implementing? It was that it allowed us to really think outside the box. And I think that when we talk about reimagining public safety here in New Mexico and community safety, we should be thinking outside the box. And so, yeah, so that was one of our guiding principles, really, was let's not be tethered to these ideas that are deeply entrenched in our community about police, what public safety is, what it could be in our communities. The group that I was a part of really had one major guiding principle, and that was everything that we do, everything that we recommend should be about creating and allowing for connected and resilient communities where everyone in Santa Fe feels safe and respected and feels like they belong. And that was one of our guiding principles in just one of our committees. And so once we established that, things just kind of started to fall in place. Not the recommendations, it was a lot of work, but we were able to think through what kinds of questions should we be asking, what kinds of presentations should we be getting in order to promote that guiding principle. I would love if we could embark on something very similar in this task force as we are going through this process.
And I'm sorry, Renee, can I ask a follow-up question?
Monica.
So Marcela and Emily, how much time did you guys have for that particular task force? Because our time frame, is that 6 months right now, just for this task force?
Yeah, it's 6 months, but it can always be extended. We just have to do it formally through the governing body. Any other? Monica, you're frozen, or can you hear us? Okay.
Yes, I'm just wondering how long they had for their task force, because it sounds like it was a lot of work. I've gotten to look at a couple of the recommendations and they were really wonderful. So I'm just curious how much time they had.
Emily?
I think it was ended up being 2 years.
What? Are you sure? Was it 2?
Well, by the time we actually started the focus groups that Marcela mentioned, that Somos started, and by the time we presented the recommendations to the governing body, which was just last March, it took a long time. But I think, the real work was probably done in a year.
That makes sense. I mean, I for me, just thinking about this, and all of the different sort of facets, and looking at the resolution that the city passed of what sort of the direction was. I mean, this could go on for a huge amount of time to really get into the detail, or not get into the detail, because there's so many things. So it seems like we would need more time than just 6 months to kind of dig into some of these issues. That's all.
And then the other thing was there's some low-hanging fruit or things that actually we could make recommendations early on. It doesn't mean that it would take a year plus to have any kind of recommendations. I think it could go in phases as needed, but I'd love to hear from others what you're thinking instead of just looking at me on Zoom. Naja.
Like, this is my first foray into local government, and it's tricky. and one of the things that is like forefront on my mind is when, you know, Alan Weber makes an announcement about forming the task force. And when I applied for it, you know, the country was literally on fire. And the rage and the hurt and the beast we're looking at, in my mind, is a systemic and institutional problem that goes back as old as the country is. And so, and this idea, so while people are enraged and taking to the streets and, you know, whatever opinions about that, of the way that was expressed aside, there was this like, okay, if there is another way to do that, what would that look like, right? And I'm speaking really carefully because I'm mindful that we're being recorded, and that, you know, to me personally, right, like as an African American, it's really important to me that my involvement in this is like real. Like it's not, we're not, and I want to be really clear that pointing out a problem isn't assigning blame. Like nobody has to be doing something wrong for there to be an issue, right? But when we look at one of the issues I'm having with government and Robert's rules, which are fine, but these are systems that were put in place to further oppression of all kinds of marginalized people, right? They're written into the policies, and so that so being presented with the documents or a presentation by fire department and police department, which was great and great information that I didn't know, literally knew 0% about how these operate and work. But I'm also really mindful that the solution might not lie in these legal forms and documents that are part of the government. Am I making sense? Because it's such a charged and such a delicate issue, but you know, how do we, for me, I'm talking about keeping my son safe, right? And these problems, we can't, I'm not interested in placating and smiling and being very palatable in the discussion of it, because I'm worried about my son. I have to have a conversation with him when he comes driving age about what he needs to do. And again, not trying to blame anybody, but that's in my mind what I want to address. So there is a frustration in this timeline, or in like, you know, that I will own and that I will need to manage to be a productive member of the task force. But for many of us in the community, this isn't a theoretical conversation. That's
Thank you for sharing that. Naja, do you feel like there is a sense, I mean, I'm getting a sense that you do have a sense of urgency. However, I just want to know, like, the way we're kind of moving with these like ideas of workforce or working group topics, is it serving you right now? Is it feeling like?
I have no idea. And I think, you know, I said to both the council members during the interview, I don't think this can be done in the original time frame. And the second part of that sentence was, if attempting to do it in this time frame is lip service, right? Not wanting to make sure, right? Address institutionalized racism in 6 months in 12 meetings, right? In any system that wouldn't work. So I'm not frustrated with the timeline we have. I'm skeptical, and my understanding is that it could be furthered and it could be moved. I think we don't want to do anything quickly. We wouldn't want to, whatever recommendations we are empowered to make, we want that to be really carefully thought out and researched with community partnership, with stakeholders, with the police department, with the fire department. So I don't have an opinion positively or negatively about the timeline. And then also, I don't know how task forces work, right? So what can we even see and find and say?
So I think you'll find more freedom once we break into the smaller groups where they aren't recorded. They aren't open to the public. It may be a smaller forum, but really, Rashawn said something similar at the last meeting, and now what I'm hearing you say now, and I don't know if there's a way either through training or through just communication to our police department regarding what you're both feeling and sensing about the community and the fears that are real for you and the community that maybe clearly I don't 100% understand, but how do we get those to the people that really make a difference and need to hear them? And that would be police and fire at the moment. So I don't know if either one of you have an idea about that. You may not, but that may be something to think about as we move forward.
Rashawn?
Yeah, thanks. This has been, I've felt lost through this whole process, frankly. Like, I don't understand. This is my first time as well into this kind of a space. And so just the language alone is just like, I'm trying to just understand what y'all are talking about. Honestly, a lot of this time, I don't like, it seems like a lot of the committees or meetings or just words that everyone's using has been used in these kind of formats before. And so I'm just like, what's a Robert's rule? What a quorum is what's a subcommittee? Like the things that just seem natural to everyone else. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? And so I'm just trying to trying to understand and keep pace. So I haven't even really got to feel anything yet. And I don't know, I think that that's just a process, and I'm actually excited to be learning this process. So I'm happy to be in this, but that is something for me right now, is just trying to understand. And this is such a personal issue as well. And so talking at it with such distance is just really strange for me personally. I've talked about this my entire life, right? And this is the first time where it's like separate in language that I don't really get about what's really personal. And so just having, it just feels really strange, and it's hard to wrap my head around. And I agree, it can be really frustrating hearing this timeline and just being like, I'm just not trying to be the Black dude smiling along for the next 6 months while what happens, like it's not a good feeling at all. And so I know that this is what we're trying to address. And I echo Naja, I'm not trying to blame anybody. It just is the process. And it seems like kind of what, I guess this is what a task force is. I don't really know. I'm interested in trying to contribute to make this change that it seems like everyone here is. But yeah, I did just want to voice that, and I'm not really sure how to address any of that rather than just, doing my Googles after we get off, and I take notes from some of the things that are said and try to find some of the resources that y'all are talking about. And trying to figure out a way to talk about this without crying. Like, it's really difficult for me. So yeah, there's that.
Thank you, Rashawn, for keeping it real for us. I mean, it is true. We have structures that are in place that do not serve the general public, and to talk about things with distance is problematic, because then we're not actually hearing from people that are most impacted and also have potential solutions. To me, those are also experts that we need to consider in our community. Any other thoughts on the process or what folks have said? Michael?
Yeah, this is a question for Marcella and Emily. You know, a lot of resolutions get passed and nothing happens. And it may be unfair to ask this question since it just got passed in March. But have you seen an impact that resolution has had on the government or on the drug issues that you were all addressing? Or is it a resolution that's waiting to be implemented, or what? If either one of you wants.
Marcella, do you want? What? I'll jump in after you.
You can do what some of the specific things are, but a report was made out of the different recommendations with rationale. Again, extensive work went into creating it, but one of the other guiding principles was to be aspirational. And so there's a lot in there that can be taken in chunks over time. And it really is an approach to reimagining how to deal with this issue in Santa Fe, and basically how to prevent people from going into the criminal justice system and get the help that they need in this particular case when it comes to problematic drug use and other things in our communities. But it went so beyond that. I mean, a lot of the recommendations were supporting things that, again, promote that community cohesiveness, like, you know, raising them, you know, making sure that we raise the minimum wage, that people have housing, that people have access to sick leave and other things that can really impact people's interaction with substances, but also the criminal justice system. And so a lot of it is broken up into chunks. And what we did was we created timelines. So these things can happen right away. These things need more process and can happen over the course of many years. These things can happen over a few months. So we're very hopeful, but also they were, you know, they were reported in March, which is when, you know, the pandemic hit. So I think there's a lot to be seen. And Emily, you might have better news about specific pieces that are being taken on right now.
I think you summed it up perfectly. I mean, literally, I think we shut down the day after we presented to the city council. But actually leading up to that and right after, we were asked to submit some budget requests. But unfortunately, because of COVID, those budget requests, you know, we couldn't get it in the budget, but there was a lot of traction and it was great. We worked with staff, and the idea was that we wanted to really, that these weren't just recommendations that the city could look at, but that we recommended to create a home for the recommendations within city government, so that and actually recommended someone get hired to carry out the plan. And I think that would have happened if COVID hadn't hit. And so I think it's something we should think about as well, is that these aren't issues that just get solved by a few recommendations, right? It's bigger and deeper and more personal than that. And so how we think about our recommendations so that they really make an impact and have a home within city government. And the other thing I think thought, it doesn't have to do with Judge, your question, but we really had to have a conversation about what can a city do and what can it not do. And so I think that's a relevant question for us as a group as well, is what can we realistically recommend that the city can take on, and what things are really, are limited by state or federal things. And so I just wanted to throw that out. And then one other, in addition to the reimagining frame, from my perspective personally, I would love to see that our recommendations, one of those like guiding principles is really around reducing the engagement of our community with law enforcement, right? Like, how can we reduce interactions? And so I just wanted to throw that out as well, that could our recommendations be rooted in a few of those ideas?
Thank you, Emily. Marianne, did you have anything to share?
Thank you, Counselor. I don't have anything to share right now, but thanks for checking in.
How are you feeling though about just how we started, or maybe a better path forward in terms of like what I guess I didn't make a suggestion, but when we have a facilitator, to have Sunshine lead us through a process to look at guiding principles and some of the things that we would like to accomplish, and even being very realistic about limitations. Just curious what you thought, and anybody really, just what you're thinking on that front about our next meeting. And go ahead.
Yeah, I think I have been feeling like I have never been on a task force or committee or anything like that. And I think I've felt a little bit unrooted, and just like trying to figure out the flow of things, trying to figure out like what it said in the like resolution and language about the task force, and like what we started doing so far. And I think I just generally haven't felt like I really have seen those connections with what has happened so far. But I do think like a facilitator will be super helpful. And then like along with what Marcella and Emily were saying, like pinning down guiding principles for the group to like really help frame what we're doing going forward and stuff. So I like all of those ideas.
Thank you. Bruce, you're deep in thought up there on my screen. Did you want to share anything?
Yes, some of my experiences with the position I had for some 38 years are coming up now, but more in the last 7 or 8 years, where I was in the administration side of it. And it looks like, I'm just looking at this task force, we're trying to see if, number one, is there a problem, and what do we need to do to solve the problems? It's a community health and safety task force, and so I think it needs to encompass more issues than just law enforcement engagement or fire department engagement. So I think we need to identify what the major issues are. Why did Mayor Weber bring us together? We need to have a focus on what we're going to try to look at and solve. And some of the subcommittees in that survey, I think if we dive into the different issues like training or what happens when a police officer is accused of unlawful use of force, what happens there, that type of stuff is great. So just so we know what it is. So that's kind of, I think we need to try to find out what issues we need to address so we can address them. So that's kind of where I'm at. We did a lot of problem solving. Railroads have a lot of problems. So we had a lot of issues we had to deal with, both with communities and different and customers. So it's kind of multifaceted, but we need to figure out where we're going with this. What are we going to try to accomplish? That's kind of, that's really my only concern, is that we have a focus so that we're not here 2 years. So that's about all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Bruce, do you think having a facilitator come and just having a session to look at our guiding principles at the next meeting would be helpful?
Yep, I'm on a BTEC committee, and we have a facilitator, and she kind of keeps us squared away. So focused on the task at hand. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mary Louise?
I just want to say that we see each other's faces, but nobody's had the opportunity to share the gift of listening and to hear why people wanted to be here. Nobody has an idea, like hearing Naja speak and Rashawn speak. I mean, we all had a stake in why we showed up today and why we originally wanted to be here, but we've never got to share those experiences that would allow us to connect with one another in a way that we're coming on an equal playing field and looking for an opportunity to make a positive difference, and I feel like when we signed up for this, there was a reason, right? Maybe our experiences, maybe the experiences of people we serve, whatever those things are, they matter for these kind of task forces. And so I really believe that discussion was amiss. And all we do is see faces and we don't see each other's hearts enough, right? So I just needed to say that.
So true. It's so limiting and hard for me to deal with computer screen conversations that are emotional and they are personal. So, okay, let's see. Time-wise, it's 6:26. Were there any burning questions or anything to add about process? And maybe, Marcela, are you raising your hand or touching your hair? Okay. I think what I'd like to do, and I'd like to know if everyone is in agreement to have our facilitator in the next meeting for January to set a foundation for us. So we feel a little bit more rooted and understanding kind of the paths forward with guiding principles. And that is like where we come from personally to Mary Louise. That does include that piece too, I believe. And then I think that will help us to kind of hone in on directions that are realistic and things that we want to tackle, even like tiered things, like things that might be we can work on in the next few months, next 6 months. And then if we need to expand and look at some other issues and expand that time, we can do that too. I just think it would help to have a facilitator kind of guide us and ground us. Is anyone opposed to that idea? Yeah, it's okay if you're opposed to it. Bruce.
I'm not opposed to it. I have a question about, we had a survey sent to us and I filled it out. I think I filled it out twice, but when are we going to start looking at the committees we're going to be on? Is that in the future meetings? Because I really believe that if you really want to contribute to this task force, once you're given a task or a section of what we're trying to find out, you need to do the research, that where you can find out. Like I've already went on the websites to discover exactly what police officers need to be compliant with training in the state of New Mexico. It's something I had to do in my job. We had 2 agents here in New Mexico, and they had to maintain certain training requirements. So I think once you get assigned to a test, you need to do a little bit of research on it on your own. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But is there any timeline on when people are going to be given certain tasks, subcommittees, etc.?
I think if we start with guiding principles, that can lead us into the conversation about areas that we can probably start looking at first. And I don't know if it really leads into working groups, but I don't know, Marcela or Emily, once you all set guiding principles for the other task force, I'm just curious. And by the way, I haven't been on a task force either, so I don't really know what I'm doing and how this is supposed to be structured. And I actually thought it would be more informal, and that's why it was frustrating for me that we have to have these kind of more structured meetings. But I'm just curious, going on the other task force, once you set guiding principles, kind of what was the next step after that?
We set them really early on. I think it was like the second meeting. And it did help us separate them into our task force. Like, we didn't know exactly what our subcommittees would look like. So yeah, it was really upfront in the process.
Okay. Chris, did you want to say something?
Just, you know, if people can start thinking about ways to better communicate with the public in general. The city has the webpage and we have Facebook and a bunch of other things, but they're not very well attended or looked at, or I'm not sure what the terminology is with social media, but we don't have a lot of followers, I guess. So when we notice these meetings or we ask for input, there's not a whole lot of people that look at that. So really what's trending now with Zoom to get as many people as possible to hear about what we're doing and willing to step up and be heard. So again, we don't need answers tonight unless you're willing, but if you can start thinking about ways or ideas to really get community involvement, I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think that just the examples Marcela and Emily gave us were in a pre-COVID world, and it functioned well because they could actually reach the public and go to the public. And so hopefully that will change next year at some point. So we still need to think about how that will work. Marianne, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I had a question, Counselor Rivera. If you could just clarify a little bit what you mean in terms of getting the public involved. Like, you know, we'll think of ideas and stuff, but like what avenues like exist already? Because a lot of like public involvement, especially with city government, is not very engaging. It's very limited. It's like one-sided. It's like people just sharing, and then there's like that's kind of cut off there, you know? So if you could clarify a little bit more what you mean.
I guess the way I envision it is having groups that would actually come and sit with us as members, and doesn't have to be the whole entire task force, but maybe 2 or 3 members, and just share ideas about what they think policing is all about, changes, even share stories the way Naja and Rashawn have. I'm sure we all have stories, but even just share those about experiences that they've had, so that we can have that input and be able to make meaningful changes, build those relationships the way Mary Louise talked about at the beginning. So that's really what I'm looking at. It's not so much of come make a 30-minute comment and then kind of go away and we never hear from you again. It's really listening to people and hearing about what's really going on. Because you know, like I said, my sheltered life, I don't deal with police very often, except in these formal meetings that we have. So really hearing from people and really understanding what's really happening, I think is important. Thanks for asking.
Monica, raised your hand.
Thank you. And to that point, Councilman Rivera, I've been thinking about this, and I'm excited that the public defender is going to come talk. And I'm not sure if that's going to be a line attorney or if it's going to be the chief or maybe the district defender. But I think to the point of sort of listening to stories and also to thinking about sort of the amount of excessive force that's actually complained about versus the amount of excessive force that actually occurs, I think are two very different things. And public defenders are people that get to watch all these videos and can talk about it in a way that sometimes people that experience that violence from police officers don't necessarily have access to these kinds of meetings, or to, they don't really have the opportunity to share these things for a variety of reasons, which we can get into. And although I think that I do have some former clients that may be willing to come and have these conversations, but I do think that, you know, sort of a step removed from that are some of their lawyers that get to see this every day, right? The little excessive force that can be much larger. And I think it's important that we ground ourselves in the fact that there is so much excessive force actually that goes unreported, because unfortunately, the people that this is perpetrated on most commonly are people that don't necessarily have a voice in these kinds of settings. And there's so much fear about retaliation. I know for me personally, I've told clients, I actually had a 18-year-old client whose nose was broken by 4 different officers. And that video was hidden from me as his lawyer. The only reason I got a hold of it was because I went to high school with one of the secretaries at the district attorney's office who gave it to me and said, Monica, they've been trying to avoid giving this to you, but I'm going to give it to you because I saw it. And that client, and that I had to tell this client, you probably shouldn't file civil charges until we're done with your criminal case, because of what could happen to your criminal case if you file those charges, right? Like there's bad things that could happen both for both cases. So there are just so many stories in the community of, you know, not just the Santa Fe Police Department, state police, sheriff's police, and I know I'm going on, but I just think it's important for us to be realistic that there's so many people that have had bad experiences. There's also people that have had really good experiences with law enforcement. And there's that sort of two-way street. And I think that hearing from these voices is extremely important. And I think that we can also get to these voices in a really safe way. Maybe not the best way, because, you know, community organizing is really rigorous and hard and takes lots of time, but I think there's ways that we can get to these stories.
Yeah, good, thanks. That's exactly what I'm looking for, and really finding it increasingly difficult in these post-COVID times where everything's on Zoom. So thank you.
So the community stories are a piece, also the learning piece too, continuously, that we get information or have presentations that are helpful for us to understand better structures or systems. So I guess I don't want to say those aren't going to happen, but the next meeting, at first I thought, well, maybe we should have that rescheduled meeting with the public defender, but I actually think we're going to need 2 hours with the facilitator. So are we okay with then the next meeting, which is January 5th, to then just kind of dig in with Sunshine and kind of create a foundation place, a starting point. Doesn't mean that we're not going to consider what we had put out there as potential working groups. I just think we need to kind of find our center. So is everyone okay with that? Marcela, raising your hand.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman. Yes, that's a great idea. I like that. But I also wanted to respond, just say a few words about the conversation about community input, engagement, and so even pre-COVID, and the organization for which I work is a community-based organization, so this is our job to know how to do this. It's even pre-COVID, asking people to come to meetings with local governments, any governments, generally doesn't get the kind of input that Marianne and Monica are talking about. And so I think, in my experience, and it has to be really deliberate. It takes great effort and it takes resources, creativity, even pre-COVID. I hope that if this is extended, we'll have that opportunity when we can actually do things in person. I just want to point back to the Municipal Drug Strategy Task Force information, because we really did get a lot of varied stories from people in confidential settings. Focus groups and community conversations were confidential and facilitated. People were compensated to participate for their time. There was interviews by task force members who had access, like Monica was saying, sometimes attorneys have access to their clients who may not want to be a part of a focus group or come to a meeting yet, but are being interviewed with the same sort of set of questions or guiding questions to be able to capture that information in those stories. And then of course, there were also anonymous surveys. Those took resources. DPA had furnished some of those resources. We also utilized the resources of the task force and the access that task force had to different segments of our community. But I think DPA also had a facilitator that they contracted to help support.
DPA, can you define DPA?
I'm sorry, Drug Policy Alliance, the organization for which Emily works. Sorry, Emily, I'm talking about you. And my point is that it was very strategic. There was a lot of effort put in to get to capturing all of that and to root our work in that. So I don't know what the will of this committee is, but I mean, I personally, that's how my philosophy is, how I operate, not just mine, but the philosophy of the movement that I'm a part of. But it does take facilitation and it takes resources. And I'm wondering, and this goes to the question, whether or not our facilitator is also being tasked with doing that kind of community engagement. And if not, can we do that? Can we have that facilitator do that? Can we have another facilitator do that? I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility.
Chris?
Yeah, I think anything's open. I think we can either ask Sunshine or see if we can dig up some additional funds for additional help. So I think we're open to really any ideas the task force has and are willing to. I know I'm willing. I know Renee's willing to go to the finance director or anybody else to ask for additional funding if that's necessary.
I think the scope of work for Sunshine now is there is a kind of community component, but it wasn't the bigger facilitation scope of work. It was a very small piece with support to help with any working group facilitation needed. So we'll have to figure that out. And it's nice to have a group like DPA that actually would pay people to help and give them stipends to participate. I'm serious. It really helps for people to take the time to share their lived experiences and get paid for it instead of just being, there's a term for it when you're not paid. I can't think of what it's called, but it's just, it would be nice even to have like a youth group and to be able to have them weigh in and give us their ideas and experiences and then actually get some kind of stipend for hanging out a few hours and telling us, what they think. So in the government world, it's so hard to get that. In the nonprofit world, it feels a little bit easier when we realize how important it is to hear from the community experts, which is just the general public. So anyway, was there anything else that people wanted to weigh in about? Or should we then make sure that we're ready to go with a facilitated conversation on the 5th? Yes, no. Rashawn's just looking at me like I'm crazy. Okay, so yes. Any other thoughts before we part? All right, well, Jennifer, do you want to say anything?
No, I think everyone's covered it. I'm not a member of this committee, but I am very happy to help support the efforts that you guys are all doing. And I'm here to kind of be the bridge to the city. So please let me know if there's anything else I can be doing.
Thank you. Michael, you had your mic off.
No, I was ready to vote yes to adjourn.
We don't have to vote. We actually don't
I'm
have
sorry.
no voting for us tonight. We just was really just
Okay.
wanted to get kind of where we're at on the same page. If there was something else or you don't agree with some of the things, please reach out too. I mean, you don't have to tell us in this forum. You can reach out by phone or email and tell us what you really think. So I'm just, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. I know maybe we didn't get to the point where some people wanted to be tonight, but I just felt like this was necessary.
And before we adjourn, happy holidays to everyone. This work is important. We'll get to where we need to be and hopefully have some meaningful tasks or outcomes from this. So just hang in there. We'll get there. And looking forward to the start of a brand new year in a couple weeks. So thank you all again.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays, many blessings, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. Hopefully you're safe and healthy and your family is as well. Bye.
Sorry, guys. You guys, I can never get off when I need to.
How weird.
There.
Bye, Mary Louise. Bye. And Monica's still on.
Yeah.
Monica, we still see you on there too.
Joe, if you're still on, could you stop the stream? I don't have the ability to today for some reason. I don't know if he is still on.
Should I text him?
Yeah. Usually I have the ability to stop the stream, but not today.
Turn off stream.
Councilwoman, are you a co-host? Try clicking the live YouTube at the top and see if there's an option to stop stream.
Mine just says view stream or copy stream.
Yep, that's what mine says. All right, well, maybe if we just end the meeting.
Okay. All right.